what I'm gonna do today is paint this. Okay, this building here, I hope you can hear me well, because there's a lot of noise here. They're doing construction. So anyway, I want to try and capture the light of this thing. It's a bit complex, but I'll try and do my best. And hopefully you'll enjoy it. So this is it, let's get started. Okay, so first I'm starting with the drawing. I find that the composition aspect is a little more challenging for me. The drawing aspect is a little more challenging when I'm working on location. Because you don't have an easy crop like you would with an image. You can just put it like literally in an image editing software and just edit it and find out what works and what doesn't. So I find it really challenging. So what I'm doing usually is starting with the point of focus, trying to determine where or establish where I want to place it, and then I sort of draw everything that's around it. So here we have as a point of focus just the main building that's in the center, and you can see I'm just following those vertical lines. They're trying to establish it. Now I did get it not as exactly as I wanted to, because I didn't leave enough room for the street under it. So this is something important I noticed that I have been struggling a bit with. Sometimes I just don't realize how much smaller I should portray things on paper to make sure everything fits. So even when I plan carefully, sometimes it just doesn't happen the way I want. The one thing I do want to take away from this is actually drawing and painting on a larger piece of paper. So this is a change I will hopefully incorporate soon. Maybe I'll get another board and I'll just use a larger one and really use a bigger piece of paper so that I can bring out more details, because I think I'm past the point of needing to work smaller. You know, in the beginning they recommend to work smaller just so you don't get too bogged down and the composition isn't too challenging and things like this. You can see everything, because larger can be a little more challenging. But with experience, I think it's possible to just move on to a larger works in general. So anyway, now I'm trying to establish the perspective. So there's this line moving left, and this one I have to draw like as a guideline. And then I'm throwing a few more lines that adhere to that same perspective, because what I want to do is make sure all the buildings fit in that way, and the street is sort of moving away from us towards that vanishing point. The vanishing point itself is outside of the frame, so you don't really get to see it. It was a very interesting, the location itself was a big challenge too, and you will see in a few moments. Just making this part, oh yeah, no, I'm just leaving it like this. So anyway, the location was challenging because there was a tree above us that kept dropping these sort of small fruit thingies. I don't think they're edible, but yeah, so anyway, it just, at one point it smacked on the piece of paper, so that was kind of funny. Yeah, it didn't ruin the painting, but it did add something to it that you will see later on. So now I'm establishing the shadows that this main structure on the center is casting on the building on the right. Drawing again the building on the right in the correct proportions and with the angles of it receding into the vanishing point. Now there is this sort of a beveled part that goes outwards, more outside than the tallest area to the left. So I want to get that in, and again you get that with lines that adhere to the different vanishing points. So you have some lines that move towards the right vanishing point, then some that move towards the left. I didn't mention, but what we have here is 2-point perspective scene. Okay, you can see this also in the reference. So yeah, and now it's a matter of just putting in the details, getting the road there as well, which will require a few more guidelines, I guess. The focus here that I want to do just have as a focal point is the awnings and the bottom part, which is actually the cafe itself. So I'm changing things around a bit. In the original reference they're a bit darker, but I'm using them as highlights. Then we have these other awnings on the left that will be a little out of the center point, so they won't be as bold as the ones in the more to the right, in that central building. Okay. Now with the street here, I figured out I didn't leave a lot of room, so I can barely maybe fit a car in there. Now the problem is that it's just too zoomed in. Okay, that's the thing. I probably should have gone a little, well, probably way zoomed out, because you don't get pulled into the scene. This is the one thing that that I actually noticed. I didn't think about it up until this point of narrating the video. You don't get pulled into the scene because I didn't leave enough blank space at the bottom, which is a really good trick to just to pull you in. So it kind of, it's like the building jumps at you, and you aren't really invited to visit it. So that's one thing I will pay attention to, hopefully, in future works, and especially when I'll start working on larger paper. It'll make, I think, a big difference in that. So now I can start putting in those details into the building. It's been actually an interesting time. I will make a vlog really soon. Sorry, talking about some changes I'm going through and things I will change in the channel. I will change the video's frequency. There's a lot of things going on, and I'm really trying to find the best way to move forward in what I want, while making sure that the channel continues growing and providing really good content. And as a part of that, I'll probably change the schedule. Again, I will post a blog about it soon. I also am thinking about making an actual schedule, maybe like set days for certain videos. So for a specific day, maybe, for example, Sunday can be painting, another day can be spontaneous sketches, another day will be the paint show. Just something like this. I mentioned this in a past vlog, and I didn't get to do it because it's just a lot of I felt like it will constrict, maybe limit me, because if I do 7 videos a week, and then I have to also do specific topics every day, and maybe one day I don't get to be outside, and so it's not really that it's too limiting for me. But when I'll change the frequency, it'll be a little more feasible, if I can say that. So anyway, there is a bit of trees on the left that will create some contrast with that building at the very edge. So this is something to pay attention to. It will be visible soon. And I'm just working my way around the scene, trying to, add the details to the small areas in between the guidelines I previously put there. So we have the car on the left, there's a person. Hopefully I'll get the person to look good. I find people in these kinds of scenes are very challenging. And once again, this can be an issue with just painting too small. Because when you do that, you kind of, you don't have too much room for the details of the people. So anyway, yes. So I try to keep it as open as possible given the current composition. Now there are 3 sort of sheds, or I don't know how you'd call it, like sun protectors, in front of the awnings that I will also probably keep a little lighter. For the windows, I tend to not draw them anymore so much. I just do a grid, and then I can fill it up with painting later on. So I'm starting with the sky wash, and for this one I'm just using some blue. The color scheme here I'm using is basically French ultramarine, some new gambos, some burnt sienna. You'll see this soon. So I'm making my way down with that first wash, trying to just get it to be as even as possible. There is one thing I want to try out that I don't do enough of, trying to get the whole initial wash to be gradual. So starting at a certain color and then maybe moving to another one, just to create some interest, because I find that my skies can be sometimes a little flat. So I'll need to develop that style kind of thing as well. Because I'm not used to working on location. I'm doing it a lot now, but it wasn't like the main thing I did up until this point in my watercolor journey. So this is one thing I want to just try more. So I'm basically learning new things in this specific environment, of working on location, and there's a lot of challenges that are added due to that. So now I'm putting the new gamboge on the walls. There was a bit of shininess there that I wanted to capture, and I really like to do this. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of magenta, which is maybe the equivalent of quinacridone rose and some other palettes or brands, or maybe alizarin crimson can work as well. all of these colors to kind of warm up some of the areas of the building sometimes. With this one, it's just yellow. What you want to make sure is to have it at maybe a little less of an angle, just so that the sky doesn't bleed as much into the buildings. It's not a must, but it can help sometimes, and I started doing it too. Because I converted my my iPhone camera tripod thing into an easel, then I can really have good control over the angle. I'm working again my way down with this wash and trying to, I didn't make too much use of a dry brush or something like this, or the paper's texture. Sometimes I do that, maybe even with the sky, depending on the situation. So yeah. And you see I added a bit of red to the right area, just to give it some more life and maybe some distinction from the center. It could be interesting if I would have done that actually in the central building. I think it would be smarter in terms of the focus and things like this. But anyway, it still works. So here at the bottom I added some blue as well. Now one concern I have is the sky, that I don't want the edge to dry too much there, where I'm going to put the trees in. So I have to, while I'm doing it, I'm quickly thinking about mixing the greens and putting it in the tree on the left. And also one thing, because it's the center of attention, I wanted to work on the awnings even before that. Now this is where I kind of break the palette I've been using so far. I'm just using phthalo green, the Schminke one. It's just a beautiful one. I love it, and I think it fits really well here. Once I'll put in the shadows, you will be able to see how this turns into how it brings out that green. Right now the green is basically a similar value, or even maybe lighter than the building, but it's gonna really pop once I put in the shadows. Okay, and again, remember, all this time the tree on the left is drying and I have to work really fast on that. So this green is a mix of the French ultramarine and the new gamboge, and you can see how different it is from the more artificial phthalo green. And I found that I talked a lot about not liking the artificial colors that look kind of like markers or things like this, or highlighters. The reason was that I was working a lot on more natural scenes, not seascapes where it can be useful actually, but more like village stuff, things like this. And these kinds of colors don't really have a place in those kinds of scenes. So this is something I've been struggling with, but in this setting, it's actually quite nice. It works quite nicely that you can use the more artificial colors for just the awnings, which are artificial, and then for the skies and the trees, use more natural colors. So anyway, now I'm using just a kind of a mixture of all three primaries here. I think there's a bit of burnt sienna in there also. I'm trying already to apply the lesson I learned about having the second wash too dark. I'm doing it too dark usually, so I'm trying to go a little lighter than usual. I'm not sure it's that visible here, but it will be maybe later on. Just trying to go a little lighter on that, because I find that I lack a bit in mid-tones. I go for the very light ones and I go for the very dark ones, kind of thinking that a good contrast will fix everything. But there's a lot to be said about the midtones of the maybe initial shadows you put in. And this scene, by the way, is, as you can see also in the reference, it's beautiful. It's there is a strong contrast, so it is kind of a good reference to begin with. If you remember, I told you I've been looking for it for a long time. On the shadow on the right, I'm using a bit of a lighter mixture that's similar. The reason I'm doing it is because I don't want it to, again, take too much of the center of attention. Now, right now, this dark mixture is fairly bland. It's kind of just gray. And I will add a bit more colors later on. I'm trying to figure out what's the best moment to add some different colors into the shadows. Like I see Alvaro Castanet does that a lot. He adds a lot of green, blues and reds and contrasts them together in the very darks. So I'm thinking when is a good time to do that. I'm slowly learning how to make them a little more interesting, the shadows. You see I'm putting a bit of blue there. It just felt like it was a little too monotonous. So yeah. And slowly you can see that the awnings already pop a bit. My brushwork here isn't spectacular. You can see the wall is wobbly. These things actually are important. I always say how when sketching, you don't always have to worry too much about getting the lines to be 100% accurate. But with painting, and especially with this significant shape, you do want to make sure you get that fairly accurately, not like I did here. So make sure to just be careful with these kinds of things. I never actually went to this cafe, but it's the first time I see it, Café Noir. But it looks good, and I heard, I think in an Instagram comment, someone said that it's a good place. So yeah. So now I'm using that very same value I used for the for some more shadows, and also for the shadows inside the windows that I will put later on. There is a change in the direction of the walls of the building, and so this area that I'm working on right now is also in the shadow. And as we move down, you can see there will be a lot more shadows. The beautiful thing is that I think the shadow that I just put, like the reverse L shape, will help bring out the light part of the building at the center. Okay, and now I'm going down all the way to the end, kind of putting in those darker darks to really bring out the the awning and all the bottom areas. There is some variety in the wash in the lower part, so I'm pleased with that. I don't really remember why I put this wet and wet there, but it's okay. So now I'm painting around the car. I think I should probably maybe focus on single objects for a while. Maybe try and paint a car separately or people separately, because when I do that, I just get better at it. But when I have to tack them into a scene, something feels a bit off, I was actually sitting here with a friend, and I did a portrait of him, and it turned out really nice. And because it's a single object, I say kind of jokingly that portraits are actually for me easier than landscapes, and the reason why is that landscapes, you have that issue of simplification. With portraits, it's more towards the expression. You kind of express what you see in the person. It's again very challenging too, because you have the shape of the human face is built to we are built to recognize it and recognize minor differences in it. So it's definitely not easy to create a realistic portrait or a portrait that's similar to the person you're painting. But it's more a matter of expression once you do. And with this kind of landscape, there's just so many variables, so many things that could go wrong with how you simplify things and what do you include and what you leave out. So this is something I find very challenging. And you can see this here. Yeah. So now with the darks, I'm not really sure what I'm doing, so I'm kind of winging it. I think I could have maybe planned this one a little better in the drawing stage, actually. It was a bit hard to make the distinction of all the details in the scene. I'm trying to create this abstract kind of look under the front shades. Because there was a lot of play, like light and shadow play there, so I wanted to indicate that as well. And yeah, just making my way around it. I think at this point I should have probably put in some more color into the shadows, but this is something I started doing ever since then, so there is some improvement in that. I definitely didn't get the impression with the car, but that's okay. The person is lost somewhere in the lines. I actually did my latest painting that I did. I hope I will share it in another video. Was very good in terms of the people in it. Felt really like I did a good job with them and placing them in the scene in a way that's relatively seamless and also making them look quite detailed and realistic. So yeah, now I'm putting in some windows for the building, just lines. You don't need more than that in this case, because I'm really trying to simplify. There's this sort of shadow under sort of a bump in the wall. This is important again to indicate the shape of the building, especially when some of the top is blended with the sky accidentally. So it is important to do that. Now I'm trying to find a balance there, because I don't want to put in too dark of a shadow in this area. So I'm kind of trying to, I light it up a little bit, because it is similar to the building to the right, and with the building on the right I don't want to get it too dark. Okay, so luckily I also have that cast shadow to play with and paint around. So so that's a good thing. It was kind of a way to connect the two together, Yeah, overall very interesting scene. I find it because it's so different from what I'm used to doing with the just all of the on-location work. By the way, I just dried my brush a bit. I should have dried it a little more to make it a little lighter. But anyway, I find that it's a completely new learning curve for me. I mentioned it in the few recent videos because it's really so different when you're out there looking at the object. And as a new learning curve, the thing is, it's like a mix of things. So there are some annoying things, like it's harder and you feel like it's a step back. But there's a lot of advantages to that. And one of the main ones is that new learning curve equals new insights that you wouldn't get otherwise. Okay, and this is the key here. I feel like I learned with every single painting so much, and a lot more than when I worked more inside. Okay, so I think that's a really good advantage to that, and it just makes you think how much experience you're missing if you're kind of repeating what you're doing too much, you know. The building on the left was yellow, so, and I don't know, I just thought maybe to try and bring out some of its yellowness, so I put in a few lines there. I actually like the way it turned out. I think it works okay, at least. I'd like to keep the yellow a little purer and maybe lighter. But anyway, it's so funny to see this when compared to the previous wash, because when I put that previous first wash, it looked really really dark and strong and like yellowy. But this one is, now it makes it look so pale. The magic of watercolor, really. Things disappear with time. Yeah. So now just final details on the windows and things like this. And just kind of changing things around as I see them. This is really close to finish, by the way. There isn't too much to add. You see now I'm putting a bit of more dry brush work. The brush I'm using is a Raphael size 12. It can't really get to a good tip, so that's one thing I should probably change. Get maybe just one that has a better tip. There are a lot of Raphael ones that do come to a good tip, so I probably should do that. And if I work larger, then it will be a little better. It will allow me to do that. By the way, on the left you see the sort of small fruit that smacked into the paper. Someone brought my attention to this. They said that, yeah. So it's like a sun, basically. Not disappointed at it too much, but yeah, that's part of working outside, really. And there was a lot of flies and things like this, so I know it's just a challenge. I don't know what I'm doing right now. I think I'm talking to the person. But anyway, yeah, that's just a part of working outside. It is a challenge, you know, it's different. So now I'm switching to my water brush, and this will really help to pull this together. The water brush I'm using here is the Fillet, I think. The one I showed you in the video as well. Yeah, it's this one. I really like it. It allows me to do some other things that I can't with the Raphael one. I think I will also get my rigger more on location with me, because it does help. This one isn't really a rigger brush, and its capacity isn't that great, but it does have the advantage of being a bit flat on one side, and so it allows me to do quite a bit of things here. So just throwing in a few lines, and this really helps to bring into focus just some of the changes and some of the changes in light and things like this. You can see it kind of helps to pull it together. If you look at the details, the abstraction and things like this, they aren't really perfect, but you can get a good impression of what you're looking at. And that's the main thing here. You're looking at a city landscape, cityscape, you're looking at buildings, you have the awnings, you have the windows. One last thing I will soon add is actually to the awnings you need to add a bit of a shadow under them. You see I add a bit of more inner shadows into the windows. On the right not as much, because I don't want it to steal the focus. So yeah. And one of the main things, as I mentioned, is to add that shadow in the lower parts of the awnings. You will see me do that in just a moment. And this will give it the three-dimensionality just a bit more to help make them look a little more alive, let's say. So yeah, this stage is very intuitive. I just kind of look at it and see where I feel like I should add some things. It's not as carefully planned as the previous ones. It can be a little slower, but it doesn't really matter at this stage. I'm just putting in lines that express what I see in front of me. So yeah. So now I'm kind of trying to, I'm adding the shadows to the car, and I'm also trying to figure out the mix for the awnings, because I don't want it to be green as well. I want it to kind of blue out the bottom. Yeah, and I also need to add some shadows exactly to here, to these windows. This is important because they are the center of attention here, and we have this window we completely forgot about. Now you want to keep the details in the area of focus a little sharper, and I think this effect was achieved with those windows on the right, so that's a good thing. Now the shadow for the awnings. I think it's just a thin layer of French ultramarine, maybe with a bit of burnt sienna or just gray that was left on the palette, making it a little bit stronger for the next ones. And you see just one stripe and you get the idea of what it looks like. And now it's really close to finish, like there's not a lot of details left. I don't even remember what I did here with those small sheds, but yeah, just really close to finish. So you can see it's just an adventure. Painting outside really is an adventure. And I find that it's also a bit addictive, because you always think, okay, what next view could I really play around with, and what could I change and make it look like the way I want and create the impression I want. So it's just a very fascinating process and learning experience. This is partly the thing that leads to me wanting to change the schedule, because it's something I want to focus on a little more. Okay. So now I'm just signing this, and this will be done once I put in my signature. I'll also show you a better picture version. So friends, I hope you enjoyed this. Let me show you the final result. Here it is. Once again, the tree has been crapping on us. This is the bad tree. It's been dropping stuff on us. Okay, so friends, unfortunately I lost a part of the video here, so I'll just narrate a bit. I really hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. I found this to be, again, a very challenging scene that I'm quite happy with the result. I did a lot of paintings ever since I did this one, and I do feel a lot of improvement in that sense, so hopefully this will continue that way, and just really enjoying the on-location work, okay? This painting will be for sale. I will put a link in the description box below, so if you're interested, check it out. Thank you so much, really appreciate it. Thank you for all the comments and support and love you give me. And I will see you again in another video tomorrow.